Hunger, satiety, and thirst. These are all processes that humans deal with daily. But what is really driving these processes? This video will discuss the factors that influence why we get hungry, full, and thirsty. First, let's define a few important terms. Satiety, the sensation that starts after the end of eating and prevents further eating. Hunger, the sensations that promote attainment of energy needs. Thirst, the sensations that promote attainment of hydration needs. An important concept in hunger and satiety is the idea of homeostasis. Homeostasis is the idea that the body has an optimal level of something, and when that is deviated from, something happens in the body to return to that optimal level. This is true for hunger and thirst. Your body has a level of energy and hydration that it prefers, and it will set various processes into motion in order to maintain that. Let's start with the different factors that can affect hunger and satiety. There are three main categories of factors: peripheral, central, and environmental. Peripheral factors are the factors that involve parts of the body other than the central nervous system, which is the brain and spinal cord. There are two main theories of peripheral factors that affect hunger and satiety. There's the glucostatic theory, which states that hunger is related to blood sugar levels, and there's the lipostatic theory, which states that hunger is related to the amount of body fat. While research has shown that there is some truth to both of these theories, there are many more complex factors at play. The first peripheral factor is food characteristics, and there are several of these. One is the amount of calories in a food. The amount of calories affects how full we get and how soon we want to eat afterwards. Eating high-calorie foods causes us to eat less soon afterward. Also, research shows that if animals are fed low-calorie foods long-term, they will compensate by eating more of that food so that their total caloric intake remains the same as before. Another food characteristic is taste and flavor. For example, people generally eat more sweet food than non-sweet food, even when those foods have the same amount of calories. There's also volume, which is the amount of food. More volume leads to satiation. However, it's important to note that volume alone doesn't lead to satiety. There must be some caloric content to accompany it in order to be satisfied. Another food characteristic is glycemic index. When a food is eaten, the glycemic index is the measure of how much total glucose is added to your blood during a specific period of time. If a food adds a lot of glucose to the blood, then it has a high glycemic index score. High glycemic index scores are associated with hunger, and low glycemic scores are associated with satiety. For example, a high glycemic index food, such as a refined carbohydrate like a piece of white bread, will not be as satiating as a low glycemic food, such as an avocado or a whole grain. The next peripheral factor that impacts hunger and satiety are the chemicals in the body. There are several of these chemicals. The first is leptin. Leptin is a hormone in the blood that is produced by body fat. It interferes with appetite stimulation, thereby regulating appetite suppression. If it is working properly, people with more body fat would want to eat less, and vice versa. The next chemical is ghrelin. Ghrelin is produced in the gut and drives appetite. It communicates with the hindbrain, the hypothalamus, and the mesolimbic parts of the brain. Insulin is the next chemical. Insulin is secreted by the beta cells in the pancreas during digestion. It reduces subsequent food intake. Cholecystokinin, or CCK, is a peptide secreted in the small intestine that plays a role in satiety and terminates eating. Glucagon and peptide YY are both peptides produced in the lower small intestine. They signal the brain and the stomach to stop digestion and help to terminate eating. Amylin is the final chemical. It is produced by the pancreas and acts in the liver. It reduces food intake once a satiation threshold has been reached. Now let's move on to the central factors that affect satiety and hunger. The first is the ventromedial hypothalamus, or the VMH. The VMH has long been considered to be the satiety center. When this portion of the brain was stimulated in research, it inhibited eating. The next central factor is the lateral hypothalamus, or the LH. This is considered to be the hunger center. When it was stimulated in research, it promoted eating. However, it is important to note that all areas of the brain around the hypothalamus have been shown to be related to feeding. The next central factor is chemicals in the central nervous system. The first chemical is neurotransmitters such as dopamine and serotonin. Both of these inhibit eating. Within the LH, they affect the size of meals. Within the VMH, they affect the frequency of meals. The next chemical, neuropeptide Y, modulates the effect of neurotransmitters and increases eating through affecting the hypothalamus. The final chemical in the central nervous system, apolipoprotein A4, is present in the fluid of the central nervous system, and when it is infused in the third ventricle of the brain, eating is decreased. Finally, let's talk about environmental factors that influence hunger and satiety. The first factor is temperature. We all know that air temperature affects hunger. Research has shown that you eat more when it is cold in your kitchen than when it is hot. The second environmental factor is odor. For example, when you smell something delicious, your pancreas may actually secrete insulin, which lowers your blood sugar level and makes you hungry. The final environmental factor is memory and learning. Childhood experiences around food and eating shape how you eat as an adult. Research has also shown that memory can play an important role in eating. It has been shown that reminders of the previous meal, for example, how much you ate and what you ate in your previous meal, can influence how much you eat in the next meal. There's also research that shows that activities that increase memory of a meal may serve to decrease food intake following that meal and throughout the rest of the day. Now let's talk about thirst. Thirst is defined as the subjective perception that drives the consumption of fluids. It's important to establish that there are two types of drinking. The first is homeostatic, which restores an animal's water balance to optimal when it is not optimal. The second is non-homeostatic, which is all other kinds of drinking. An example of homeostatic drinking is the fact that humans drink in relation to how much they eat. So the more they eat, the more they drink. This is because the body wants to keep a correct food-to-water ratio in the GI tract. There are many physiological mechanisms that create a thirst response. One involves the LH, which is the hunger center we discussed earlier. Pressure sensors in the body detect intracellular water loss or a decrease in blood pressure, and the hypothalamus releases antidiuretic hormones in response. This causes the kidneys to retain water and lower urine volume, which initiates thirst. Angiotensin also plays a key role in creating a thirst response. Angiotensin is a hormone in the blood that initiates drinking by constricting blood vessels, therefore raising blood pressure and increasing the release of antidiuretic hormones. Like mentioned earlier, the release of antidiuretic hormones causes the kidneys to retain water, lower urine volume, and initiate thirst. There are several factors that can impact this physiological thirst response. For example, diabetes can increase thirst because high blood sugar raises concentration of particles in the blood, which the body compensates for by pulling waters from the cells into the blood. This then increases urination, and in turn, makes someone more thirsty. Physical characteristics such as age and weight also have an impact on the thirst response. The elderly have lower body water in general and lose their regulatory responses as they age. This can lead to water deficit dangers such as increased sensitivity to temperature changes and impaired memory and decision making. Obese people can also be thirstier because they have higher angiotensin activity, which increases blood pressure. There are also environmental factors that can influence the thirst response. These include temperature, activity level, the foods we're eating, how much foods we're eating, and many others. For example, lettuce is made up of almost 96% water, so it hydrates us more and makes us less thirsty. This has been a brief explanation of some of the key factors that impact hunger, satiety, and thirst. These are complex, interdependent processes that are an example of just how hard our bodies work to keep us alive and thriving. Hope you enjoyed.